morning, Michael, and good morning, Rebecca. Thank you for joining us on our Surfs Up series at the coast.
Great to be here at Broadbeach. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. The way that we like to start all our episodes is to let you introduce yourself. I'm already pretty blown away, and I feel like you've had a million lives in the construction industry already. You have your open builder's license, you've been principal, contractor, subcontractor, you've also doing your master's in construction law, and right now you are manager of contracts at the Gold Coast City Council. Can you please walk our guests through, I suppose, how you ended up in the world of construction and your pathway today?
Funnily enough, I wanted to do anything but building. I'm a third generation builder, and my brother and I, to remain under our father's roof, had to work in the construction industry on Saturdays and things like that to earn our right to be part of the family. So we both grew up hating it, and he's now a lecturer in paramedic studies and is a senior paramedic in Queensland. But being a real daddy's girl, my dad ended up needing more help than he wanted to. I originally went to do my law degree, and Dad had a car accident and had a bit of an injury, and because I was the one most linked to the business, I forego what I was doing and stepped in and took over a lot of the family business whilst Dad recovered, and was always going to go back and just never did. I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with, having something to drive around and say, I worked on that and I did that, and I loved fighting time. I'm very competitive naturally, so I loved hitting that 4-day turnaround for a deck. I loved problem solving, which you have to do on a building site all the time. And so I fell into building, and eventually I was on the development side. So I've managed sites. I moved into the contract space. I ended up liking the commercial aspects of the contract space. Went to Sydney, lived in Oxford Street. So I was 22, I think, when I moved to Sydney with one of the developers I was working with. And I just loved it, thought it was great, and never looked back. I've been a contractor, I've been a consultant. I went into all different types of subcontracting firms. Like a lot of people in the building industry, you just see a gap and you fill it, and really lucky to have some great mentors and some great opportunities. And by the time I was 30, I had a career that most people have to wait till they're 50 or 60 to do, just right place, right time. Figured, give it a go. And I think if you work hard enough and you tried and you were willing to learn and you listened, I just think you can pick up a lot of things, and I was lucky that I did it. And once I had a reputation, I've only ever done one job interview, and that was for my current job at Gold Coast Council. Up until then, I'd always just either been headhunted or passed around. So I think once you learn what you're good at and you get a passion for it, people can see it.
Get a reputation.
Yeah.
In our pre-podcast chat, one of the statements that has stuck with me is that as a part of your family, you chase cranes up and down the East Coast. I thought that was a great expression. So from your family's perspective, I presume that was development type interest, or was it building contract?
Yeah, so my dad's an interesting guy. He's unfortunately got brain cancer at the moment and probably won't comprehend the podcast. But my dad, as a young fella, moved from Inverell, which is in Western New South Wales, and he was the first contractor to build all the Joyce Main buildings, which for those of you in Queensland is what Domain is now. It's all based on she was like an early Harvey Norman. And
TV ads ever.
Yeah, she was. And he also picked up the contract to build all the McDonald's in Australia for quite a long time. So he started off that way, and then he went into high-rise buildings, and he happened to end up with Peter Spira, who was 2IC at Meriton Apartments later on. And Dad ended up doing a lot of Meriton's work for 36 years. So I was pretty lucky to be exposed to excellent people from a really young age. And I didn't actually realise until I was thrown in the deep end how much of the building knowledge I'd learnt by osmosis, because by the time I formalised my study, I was so far ahead of kids or other students who were just coming in straight from high school. The fact that I had to be on the building sites and knew everything, I just didn't realise other people didn't know it because it was all I knew. But yeah, look, the building industry makes or breaks a lot of people. It's very volatile, with the high level of bankruptcies. That's just what happens. In the coast, it was either boom or bust. It was never this is probably the longest period that the construction industry's had some sort of stability in southeast Queensland that I've seen in 30 years. But we'd come up here for 5 or 6 years, then there'd be a bust. You'd have to go back to Sydney or Melbourne. So I ended up going to 7 schools because wherever Dad went to follow the cranes, that's where we all went.
Great expression, follow the cranes. There's quite a few cranes around at the moment up here.
Yeah. Yeah, like I've always been fascinated with cranes. I went up in the one of the cranes that was on World Square because I did the internal fit out at World Square down in Sydney, and the amount they move and everything, it's just freaky. They've got brass balls, riggers. Yeah. They're really interesting guys too. Like the Lindors brothers were quite a new company when they were doing the tower cranes on some of my jobs, and on a Sunday they'd come in themselves and jump the cranes, and it was just amazing. It was a golden era of building for me. I don't like it'd be very hard for someone coming into the industry now to have the experience that I had, because it's not the same anymore.
In all of your roles and hats that you've worn, do you think that it helps you in your role at council now and gives you more perspective and do a better job?
Look, I think it's very easy to sit there and I find with contracts it goes either way. The contract's written up to come up with the deal and gets ignored by both parties until there's a problem. Or you can stick to the contract. And sometimes you get to the point where you can be right or you can get your job finished. And I think in government contracting, me having been a contractor and having been a subby and understanding supply chain issues and being able to discuss that from a experienced point of view with the contractors, our legal costs are very low. We very rarely go all the way to dispute, and we've, I think, had 2 adjudications ever go all the way through in 12 years. So I take that as a reflection of how good I am at liaising with the contractors and explaining why I'm going that way with the contractors to my internal stakeholders at council, because there's more than just money at play. Sometimes time, it's a different driver in social construction than in private practice. So we want to build up businesses. We want to support local businesses. We want to provide the right infrastructure that the public requires, and we want to provide it in a timely fashion. So I've got different drivers than just the bottom line that you might have in private practice. So I think you're right. If I hadn't done everything I'd done, I wouldn't be able to navigate the disputes that we have.
If I take a step back, what is your role at council? What do you do day to day?
So I'm the superintendent for all contracts at council. That's just a function though. So my title is Principal Contract Governance Officer. So my main role is to ensure that contractors are treated fairly and ethically in accordance with the agreement both people have come to when they've entered into the contract. So if you've been involved in the design of the job, or you've been married to the job for 3 years and you're getting it all underway, and then you're still left unfettered running the contract, how can you be expected to ethically ascertain whether a variation's right or wrong? Like, yes, your technical expertise should play into it, but what you think has been included in the drawings and what an independent third party sees is in the drawings can be 2 different things. So one of my major roles is to perform that independent certifying function. and to hold both parties accountable to their rights and responsibilities under the contract that they've entered into. So it's to get the right outcome for ratepayers legally and in accordance with what was signed. Yeah.
Do you find it challenging to hold an independent third-party roles? I always wonder how you swap your hats over.
Yeah, they call it the two-hat conundrum. Look, the independence is a fallacy to me. I think in government contracting, when you're performing a business function, you have a legal obligation under legislation to be transparent and ethical anyway. So whether or not you're called a superintendent or not, if you're doing business, you should be doing it ethically and transparently, which is slightly different than in private practice. You want to get the win, yeah, which sort of suited my competitive spirit a bit better. Look, I don't have a problem with it because when I took the job on and when I've had discussions with senior management, it's always been respected that my decisions are based on the contract and that the contract is my boss, not the budget and not the program. And I think the most important part for any superintendent, whether they're in private or public practice, is you've ensured you've got the right information, you've made a legitimate consideration of all lodgements by both parties, you've made it clear to both parties that the other side's going to see what they lodge. So that can be upsetting with council people. Like, they might want to write in and be quite disparaging in their emails to me, and I have to say, listen, I don't have privilege. Please don't write that way to me. Anything you send me will be made available to the contractor. It's a professional dispute. Let's keep it professional. So de-escalating by depersonalising the information and everything, I haven't struggled at council. I've never ever had council, I've had a few times where I've had people disagree internally with my determination, and I said they're free to dispute it under dispute clauses in the contract, just like the contractor is, and for some reason it just disappeared. But as long as I've articulated my reasoning, and you can be wrong. As a superintendent, you can be wrong, and that's important, and you can always correct administrative error. But you have to show that you had the skill and the expertise to be making the decision. Where you lack that expertise, that you obtained it and you use that lawfully in making your decision, and that you articulate that clearly to both parties so they understand why you came up with your decision. It can't just be because I said so. And I think other superintendents I've talked to in other places, they don't do that a lot of the time, and that causes a lot of the disputes. If you're quite clear about why you've said that, and I'll have a contractor say to me, I disagree with your assessment of variation 1 because of this, blah, 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 and they'll send me additional information. I'll allow the principal to give me additional information, and I'll assess it. And I'll say, well, because of this clause, I find that irrelevant, or because you had this drawing on this date, and you have this obligation to act in a timely fashion in notifying us, even if I do agree with your reasoning, you're now time barred, so unless the principal waives the time bar. If you're quite deliberate in how you set it out, and it also helps with adjudications. If you're setting it out the same way they're going to read it.
Just about to say the same thing, because adjudicators have to do exactly the same thing, and they can be as wrong as ever, but as long as they turn their attention and apply themselves in good faith, consider all the positions and articulate, yes, I consider this and this is my decision. You can be right, but if it's been done in good faith, the independency of the review, if I can call it that, is normally respected by the parties.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, has anyone been caught out with that malicious and, because I've done the adjudication calls with Tim Sullivan. Obviously, because of conflicts, I don't adjudicate, but it'd be interesting to see that, because if you haven't put your mind to it, and
you lose your immunity.
Yeah, that's right. You can. And there's been a few tries to get superintendents. There was that case down in Sydney where I think it was the ANZ Bank tried to join the superintendent when a developer went broke, and the superintendent had over-certified. And that was the closest one yet, where the superintendent's nearly been joined as a party to the contract and held for damages, yeah.
I can honestly say that because I was heavily involved in bringing adjudication into Queensland in the late 90s and 1990s and early 2000s, and I went on to become the adjudication registrar for a long period of time. But I can honestly say that the most overriding factor that resulted in, at that time, the CYPA legislation going through with 100% support in the Queensland Parliament was a belief that I was able to a position I was able to establish that there was not enough superintendents independently applying what they should have been doing. So I always say to people, if contractually, because I think an adjudicator is just a statutory superintendent.
Yeah. No, I look at it
and
the
a
same
superintendent is just a contractually a contractor adjudicator. If superintendents had been doing what they should have been doing over a long period of time, you would never have had wouldn't have had the need for adjudication.
New Zealand's a great case in point with that, where they've made it compulsory on some contracts to have that third-party certification function, because their court system just went into total flux because there was too many disputes in building disputes and too many builders going broke, too many subbies going broke. It just brought it to a standstill. So it's compulsory to have third-party certification in a lot of their contracts over there for the same reason. But then again, when's a superintendent too? Because I've met some that should perhaps direct their passion elsewhere. But then, and I often, it would happen at least once a month, where the fact that I'm an employee at council straight away means that I should be deemed not able to be the superintendent, right? So we have put in, I don't know what you want to call them, they call them Chinese walls or ethical walls within council. I don't answer to the budgetary people. I don't answer to the program people. I used to answer up to the city solicitor, but now I answer directly up to the CFO. But my decisions are kept independent by the fact that I'm not part of the delivery function that way.
Yeah.
And that was partly because of my insistence as well. I really think it's a stupid argument anyway, because let's say you hire ABC Consulting to be your superintendent. The conflict comes from the fact that the principal always pays them. So they're going to want more work off the principal. They're always going to side with the principal, So, look, it really comes back to ensure the principal has an obligation to ensure the superintendent is given exactly what I have at council, which is the independence to make my decisions without fear or favour. And if the principal disagrees with it, they can go and get legal opinion. Happens all the time internally. If I'm doing a big dollar dispute or something that's complex, especially if it's got forensic programming or something, I will get it peer reviewed by external consultants. I have access to my own consultants to do that. So I'm more than happy that when I send out a piece of paper that I've put the right amount of effort in to cover me.
You've tested it yourself.
Yeah. But it's the two-hat thing is a common question. And I actually think it's a bit of a fallacy. Any good contracts manager should be operating as a superintendent, because you both need an outcome. You need the project finished as the principal, and the contractor needs to not go broke doing your contract. So I don't see that it's a conflict. If you're actually looking at it, you should be both working in accordance with what you agreed to.
The other benefit of a successful completion of a project, particularly if the contractors work with, let's call them their A subcontractors, is you're going to keep the A subcontractors on board for the next project. So you can preserve that relationship with your subbies and your suppliers, everything like that, because that's a flow-on effect of a successful project being completed.
And that's where we were talking about with the unprecedented peak that we're having at the moment, and skill sets and everything. As a previous contractor myself, my reliance on and trust that I'd built with suppliers and subbies and things like that, that's all getting lost in this big boom or bust. You're being forced to go outside your known supply chain, but then the allocation of risk in the contract, you're still wearing all that risk. So I do think for contractors in the market at the moment, the allocation of risk in contracting works is still going to be the biggest problem for the industry, because you can't have the same confidence in the quotes you're getting to put your tender in, but then you're getting signed up to stick to that. It's a problem.
So you're finding that you're having to go to a greater pool of subbies because they've been, in inverted commas, enticed elsewhere?
Yes, definitely. But I'm finding even the existing subbies that I have are having to go to a wider pool of staff and their quality control, and that's then increasing their administrative costs to meet our standards. Look, there's no way around it. Government providence and QA and everything is a massive part of working in any government department. when they have to have all these untested staff or untested suppliers and untested people, that creates extra work for them. And that's a bit of a problem.
When you're saying untested, what are you referring to?
Well, they're just having to hire whoever they can get.
People who they haven't used before.
And I do worry about increased safety incidents happening because of you might have a qualification. It doesn't mean you're experienced or skilled. They're three separate things. And I've definitely noticed an increase in safety incidents across the industry. Like my husband's in the industry as well, and all my friends are in the industry. That's just how it works. You know, like a concrete pump turning up to site and none of the operators having a hard hat. I had to slow down a pour and go and buy 3 hard hats the other day. I mean,
why do you think...
That's back to the 1970s, isn't it?
I mean, come on, guys. You know, here's a hanky. Let's tie the corners. Is that where we're at? You know,
Why is that slipping?
Because they need bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people, including myself, when you're looking at progress on a site, one of your key indicators is the amount of labour on site. So when you're looking at it and you know that that job should have 60 people on it for them to be meeting the program that they're giving you, so they're self-reporting and giving you a program and you turn up and there's 6, you're sending them a notice, aren't you? I have strong concerns you're not going to meet the program you lodged given that you've got this and this, you know. So contract management's turning into micromanagement at the moment because you've got to try and help your contractors over the line, and that's private and public. That's not just in council. That's everywhere because they're between a rock and a hard place, a lot of these people. They're having to expand quicker than they would have liked to. I think it's also an explanation for the high number of bankruptcies and insolvencies. People are, once you hit that mark, and it'll become worse in October with the $1 million mark, it's very hard for people to control their financing costs when they're just growing. And it's hard. You might put a tender in the government sector. When you start that tender process, by the time you get it is 10 months later. You know, you've picked up other jobs or whatever, so that you're going to have to hire other people. We're going to demand your A-team because that's who you put your tender in on, and we're going to hold you to it. So then your other jobs are going to fall behind with brand new people that are untested to you, that you don't know who they are. That then means you have to physically go around and micromanage. Yeah, it's a cluster, isn't it? I'm glad I'm not a contractor at the moment, to be honest. And you know, for someone that loves the industry as much as me, it's a very difficult market to be in at the moment.
So we hear these buzzwords, and we spoke about it before, about collaborative contracting and all that sort of stuff, which from a conceptual point of view, I don't know how you can argue against it. But from a practical point of view, you need the right people in the right places in a project to bring collaborative contract to a successful conclusion, aren't you? So
We're dipping our toe in collaborative contracting at the moment. I've previously worked on collaborative contractings outside of in previous roles, and it was just a buzzword in my previous experience. In Australia, we have the combative attitude. It's the us and them attitude on a site, and that goes down the chain with the suppliers and the contractors. I would think there is no way to correct it until you keep doing it, but the culture for collaborative contracting needs more work for us to make that work. And to do that, you need stakeholders to have different drivers in their contracting head, yeah? So if you want to have a fixed point in time and a fixed budget, collaborative contracting won't work for you. So you've got target modifiers and all these sort of things that occur in contracts. When you're reporting up to your executive, whether it's in a government body or on the other side with the alliances, they're money people, right? You're talking to a bunch of accountants a lot of the time. So collaborative contracting needs a cultural change, and I don't know that Australia's there yet. I know the industry says they are, but then when I've personally dealt with industry or talked to other people who are currently in collaborative contracts on the other side, they still sound very combative to me.
What does the ideal collaborative contracting situation look like?
I'm doing a lot of research into dispute resolution boards and how they can fix the industry at the moment. Like that's nothing to do with my role. It's just something I personally am intrigued by because it's working so well in other countries. So sometimes I think the Snowy Hydro project's got one because I think I've met a couple of people that are part of the shadow team. So you've got the actual team running the different parts of because there are multiple alliances down there because it's such a huge risky job. They then will have shadow consultants that they've all agreed to pay. So they might have a shadow forensic planner, they'll have a shadow quantity surveyor, and these people form the basis of the dispute resolution board. So it's not just these parties, it's these sort of like independent watchdogs that might go down once a month or whatever. So they're getting paid a fee to shadow everything that's happening in the contract. But then you have to look at what's the administrative cost to run that and how many contracts is that really suitable for? And are we getting to the point, if we push for collaborative contracting, to the point where it's like that and it's so expensive that it's only suitable for mega projects, we're going to continuously build up international companies and leave our local industry behind, which is what we've been doing.
So local industry will never be able to afford shadow to everybody.
So do you break it up instead of heading down these mega projects? Have the mega projects, but have them in smaller chunks so you can build the competency in Australia, because we are lacking in that. The collaborative might be controversial. In the collaborative contracting world, Australia is lacking in expertise on both sides.
Is it also genuine early engagement with everybody involved? I think is absolutely, and that's something, and also sharing of crucial data, which is two things. Because we're such a tribal society, and I think that gets back to the point you're saying is everybody's competitive, and I think it comes back. Look at the way we are tribal when it comes to state of origin and everything like that. We're just tribal. Like, pick a side, and I think that's the problem. Is that you're trying to adjust a mindset which is not a natural Australian mindset. We're competitive by nature, and it's like pick a side, and I'm batting 100% for you. And the rest of you can sort it out because it's just a win-win situation until we flick a switch and say, well, the win is a global win. We've got to share the win. We've also got to be prepared to share the losses when it's not a good outcome. And I think you're right. I think it's part of our psyche.
Look at our political cycle doesn't help that. Like, in government projects for sure, because I feel the pressure sometimes, but nowhere near as much as my state counterparts would. Agreements made under a previous, government, and then you come under a new government and they want to come in and, gung-ho you as the staff. That's increasing stress in a stressful industry, depression and suicide and self-harm within the building industry is at a peak at the moment. It is a combative industry at the moment. It's a very difficult industry to survive in at the moment. From labourers up to executives. It's a very difficult industry, and we've got to do something with the culture and with the mindset so that, you're right, everyone has to win. The project has to be the winner. Absolutely. Right? So it shouldn't come down to, and you know what, KPIs in job positions drive the wrong behaviour in collaborative contracting still. Yeah. So instead of having savings or variations, so I know at one of my jobs, when I was on the dark side, I got paid 10% of what I saved under the established budget. So, I went to Russia on one of my bonus checks. That won't work in the new contracting world. So with risk sharing and everything, for me to go, so I didn't mind working the 60 hours and finding every little thing I could cop the contractor on because, hey, I got to see St. Petersburg. Always wanted to go there.
You were incentivised to do it because the contract incentivised you to do it that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wasn't a superintendent then too. I was just a commercial manager. But, we've got to look at how we set up, how we employ people and what is our definition of success in a job role to get the right drivers to make collaborative contracting more appealing, yeah? Because if my personal job is going to rely on finishing on time, on budget with no issues, I'm never going to be good in a collaborative role, am I? No. So you're hiring people with the wrong KPIs in their job descriptions and then shoving them on a collaborative contract. So you're tying both their hands behind their back and giving you, as a management or executive, you're giving yourself a big stick to hound them into the ground to try and make the impossible work. The legislators and the government are the people that can fix this, and they don't. So you can't look at the housing crisis without looking at the push for the Olympic Games and without looking at the push for increased infrastructure for population growth and all of this. So you're taking the finite group of resources and having them compete against each other.